you guys remember Steve Young going off on the Dolphins, right? And talking about how, he was putting the Dolphins were putting people at risk and for tanking, supposedly, right? And here's Steve Young, by the way.
You might as well just go ahead and waste this year and just flush this year away. And that's unfortunate.
But you can't waste a year, and you can't flush away because people have to go play the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, what I'm
and
saying,
they put
I'm saying organizationally,
but that's the problem. The GM can be in the back room, and they can figure out what the big plan is. And the plan might be that we want to get a lot of young players, and we don't have to pay for 4 or 5 years. Let's make a Super Bowl run. Let's get a quarterback out of it. Okay, that's the plan. We're going to quietly get rid of some players, but we're going to let everybody know in the locker room that we support them. We're behind you. But when you don't do that, you put people's health at risk. You put people. This is not baseball or basketball. You can tank in basketball. No one's get hurt. In football, they get hurt. And what the Miami Dolphins have done this year is put people at risk physically, and it's not right. You can't be so irresponsible to people's health.
Now, he really wanted to put life, and just go to a complete extreme, which was, again, just so asinine for Steve Young to do that. So on Monday, I'm watching the Countdown show, right? And Steve Young comes, and he went from being a quarterback to being a cornerback.
And look, back to Brian Flores. We were critical of the management of about a week, 6 weeks ago because we believe that they were putting that locker room at risk because of the way that they were not getting rid of players, the messages they were sending. Brian Flores righted that ship. The locker room took control, and I give them a tremendous amount of credit for those guys. What they've done with what they were given.
Yeah, no still, question. It's a game that the Eagles should have won.
Oh. All right, now, first of all, Steve Young, you're full of crap, okay? And it wasn't it was you. You were the one that was critical. You were the one that was saying that they were putting anybody at risk. And let me tell you something, all right, Jagoff? It has nothing to do with Brian Flores. Brian Flores coaches them up. The way you made it sound is that those players physically did not belong on the field because they were all at risk, because it was like putting me on the field. That obviously I'm going to get injured and I can't play offensive line, so I will get the quarterback killed. That's how you made it sound, smartass. Don't give me this crap. Backtracking ass wuss. Oh, yeah, well, want to thank Brian Flores has been kicking ass. I don't need you to tell me that. Steve Young. The dude played the game, and he comes up with the dumbest thing in the world, that you're putting players at risk. These are professional football players, and he made it sound like they're putting a bunch of plumbers out there. He made it sound like those guys were inept. Sam Agwavon is not inept, okay? Neither is any of the other guys, Nick Needham, any of those under-the-radar guys that Steve Young doesn't even know, one of them. He has no idea who the hell Sam Agwavon is. This is the problem when you put people to do a job and they don't work at it. You understand? If you're going to sit there and be an analyst, then watch the games, asswipe. Don't tell me that the players are at risk, because at that moment, leading up to that Pittsburgh game, the team was getting better every week and were very competitive. But you're not watching it. So what are you doing, Steve Young? You're going off of weeks 1 and 2. When 14 guys or 15 or 18, whatever the hell it was added to the roster the week of week 1. Week 1, there were players introducing themselves to each other in the Dolphins because they had no idea who they were. So obviously there was no continuity or chemistry. It wasn't because of what you said, Steve Young. You made it sound like they were completely incompetent and had no business being on the field. You made it sound like they put 22 of me out there on the field. Then that would be the case. If I'm out on the field, then you can say everything you said, Steve Young. But every one of those players are professional football players. They didn't make NFL squads, but they are professional football players. They're big and strong. I bet you that they would injure you right now, Steve, if you got out on the field. Let's see who's at risk. Backtracks, and he makes it sound like so what did Brian Flores give those players? What, he roided them up or something? Is that what he did? Because he taught them safety lessons? Oh, I'll give Brian Flores credit. I'm going to pop that thing back up again, okay?
And look, back to Brian Flores.
Thank you.
We were critical of the management of about a week, 6 weeks ago because we believe that they were putting that locker room at risk because of the way that they were not getting rid of players, the messages they were sending. Brian Flores righted that ship. The locker room took control, and I give them a tremendous amount of credit for those guys. What they've done with what they were given.
Yeah, no still, question. It's a game that the Eagles should have won.
What the front office gave them. They gave them the players that they're winning with. Obviously, the front office gave you players that you can work with and win with. Here's the thing that it just goes over all the tankers and all. Remember what I told you yesterday about the tanking? Go back and listen to that segment. The tankers have another agenda, and it's their backup agenda. Because if that agenda doesn't work, they go to the other agenda. And he's one of them. It's you can't have one without the other. It's not – Brian Flores has kicked ass. I know that. But the front office has done a pretty good job of finding the young guys so he can kick ass and mold and develop and try to get better. He didn't hand them 22 deadbeats. No, he handed them young players that some of them have some ability, and you can get something out of them. And maybe mold them into something for next year, which some of those young guys will roll over into next year. May not be starters, but they'll be key reserve guys. And trust me, they will be very important as key reserves. You know why? They know the system already. It's pretty good. That helps. Big time. Steve Young, you're full of crap, dude. I would just respect you more if you just came out and said, you know, I was way off the other day. Way off. I made it sound like they were at risk, and they're not at risk. They're a very competent football team. They prove it week in and week out. But the problem is, Steve Young, you don't watch the games. You watch the highlights. And since the Dolphins aren't an elite team, they're not going to be in the highlights. If they show any highlights in a Dolphins game, they're showing the opponent beating the Dolphins. And a couple plays that they made. That's it. But they don't even explain it to you. Hey, they were actually competitive for a certain amount of time in this game. Until this moment in the game. But if you don't watch the games, how can you talk about them? How do you know about the teams? How do you know about the players? It's like when, Screamin' A has been busted a couple times already because he just doesn't watch football. Which, again, why ESPN brings him on to talk about football is beyond me. If you know your employee doesn't do that, it's like a coach that puts a player in position to fail. He's a zone corner, but we're going to play him man-to-man. Jamar Fletcher. That kind of stuff. It's like, don't you get it? He can't do this. Play him the other way. Yeah, no. Let's just put him out there to fail. And there's Steve Young. But I guess you're a Hall of Famer. You can get away with it. You can say all kinds of stupid-ass stuff that make no sense. Between him and the whiny little Dan Orlovsky, those two, I've had enough of those two. No, and throw Booger McFarland in there. Booger McFarland, Dan Orlovsky, and Steve Young. You can throw all three of them out. I've had enough of those three clowns.